Hi there, everybody. I'm Dr. Rhea and ODH, pronouns she, her, and I'm the Director of External Affairs at Equitas Health. As many of you are aware, we've had lots of attacks on gender-affirming care nationally, but especially here in Ohio, particularly in the past 3 months. Today was a big day for the proposed anti-trans administrative rules from the DeWine administration. Today, the Ohio Department of Health decided to have their first public hearing relating to those rules. We've already submitted multiple pieces of written comment to the Ohio Department of Health, and we've been actively fighting against these rules since Governor DeWine introduced them in early January. But today's public hearing, which was held over Microsoft Teams, solicited feedback, live feedback from members of the community who were able to tell their stories. Overall, at today's hearing, there were literally no people that shared any positive remarks about these proposed anti-trans administrative rules. Every single piece of testimony that people provided at today's verbal hearing was against these rules. Ohio doesn't want them, and Ohio knows that these rules are not constitutional. So what happened at today's hearing was we had, again, a group of people who shared their experience about why these rules are bad for Ohio, why these rules are bad for people's health care, and why these rules will actively harm the trans community. But instead, the Ohio Department of Health, after today's hearing, decided that they would not actually have a review of the verbal comment that was provided, and instead of making additional revisions to these proposed anti-trans administrative rules from the DeWine administration, the Ohio Department of Health ended today's public hearing by simply referring the rules to JCAR, which is a huge, huge step. This is a very dangerous moment for the state of Ohio because these rules have now been moved on to essentially the next part of that review process prior to implementation. So Ohio Department of Health has decided to review, instead of reviewing these rules and making additional revisions, to simply refer them to JCAR. So JCAR stands for the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review, and this is a joint legislative body made up of people in the Ohio General Assembly. And this committee consists of 5 state senators and 5 state representatives. And JCAR as a group, their primary function is essentially to review any proposed new, amended, or rescinded rules from over 100 different executive agencies from across the state. And their purpose, their sole purpose, is to make sure that those rules don't overextend the rulemaking authority that the General Assembly has granted to Ohio's executive branch. So JCAR can essentially make a recommendation to invalidate all or part of a rule in a number of different situations. So some of those, based on information from JCAR's own website, is basically if the rule exceeds the scope of the agency's statutory authority, if the rule conflicts with legislative intent under the statute with which it was proposed, if they have an adverse impact on business, or if the agency has failed to demonstrate a business impact analysis report, or if the rule implements a federal law or clashes with a federal law in a way that is stringent or burdensome. So we at Equitas Health, and of course many of our partners, firmly believe that all of those things are in conflict with these ODH rules. These rules absolutely overextend the Ohio Department of Health and the DeWine administration's statutory authority to regulate healthcare and to take healthcare access away from people. These rules absolutely conflict with legislative intent because they will allow the Ohio Department of Health to collect data on the care that trans adults are receiving in the state of Ohio. And they'll then provide that data to executive branch officials, but also to the Ohio General Assembly. This absolutely will have an adverse impact on the economy here in Ohio. And we have not seen any type of business impact analysis that ODH has provided or the DeWine administration has provided. We know that these rules will harm Ohio's economy because they're also harming Ohio's healthcare and harming people across the state of Ohio. And of course, we at Equitas Health and many of our partners firmly believe that these rules conflict with multiple areas of federal law, including Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, people's right to access health care in a non-discriminatory fashion. So there are a number of ways in which these rules conflict and overextend the DeWine administration's authority, and we will absolutely continue fighting them at JCAR, which again is the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review. At today's hearing, Ohio Department of Health decided that instead of revising the rules even further, based upon the verbal testimony and the written testimony that people provided, they decided to simply advance these rules to JCAR. So that is where the fight is now moving. The fight is now moving to JCAR. And we are already doing outreach to members of JCAR and letting them know that these rules are bad for Ohio, and we want you to join us in that fight. Please take a moment to go to protectgac.equitashealth.com and learn about what you can do, which is now contacting the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review and telling them that these rules are bad for Ohio. These rules are bad for Ohio's people, Ohio's economy, and Ohio as a whole.